Hello friends. Today I'd like to discuss this effect in the chart of the repeating vertical lines. I've called this the technological effect. And the reason that I thought it was technological in short is, it's periodic, it's a repeating pattern. It appears to repeat at the same intervals, start at the same hertz, end at the same hertz. And from an intuitive standpoint, it feels unnatural to me. I give more information on this in the Technological Effect Primer, which is a 2-hour video that is in the Technological Effect playlist. And I call it technological because I suppose that my mind comes up with that as being a possibility for something that might be artificial in the chart. And by artificial, I just mean not generated by the natural elements. For example, lightning, any electromagnetic effect from other, potential events. One that is where the effect is being interpolated or somehow inserted into the environment. And by the environment, I mean the frequency range from 0 to 40 hertz of the atmosphere around us, from the surface of the planet up into the higher atmosphere. For more on the range of the Schumann resonance and what that is, you can go to my first video in the beginner playlist, What the Heck Is It? So there were a few key points I wanted to make about the technological effect, and because I have so many long videos discussing this, I'd like to really summarize succinctly some key points here. The first key point is that the quote-unquote natural energies seem able to shine through it. I don't know if they're affected by it, but it doesn't necessarily seem like it is. Visually, it appears that they're fine. They shine through, and that the technological effect is either in the background or over them, depending on, I don't know, maybe the amplitude of the energy. Now, the interesting thing about the technological effect is the timing of when it's occurred. Prior to September 2020, the technological effect appeared to be somewhat random. By that, I mean that there weren't key events that I could associate it with. Not that that didn't happen, it's just that it wasn't obvious. The next thing is that it tended to occur around the time when there was no data. So there would be no data, or there would be a technological effect, and then it disappeared and there was no data. And then often what would happen is the data would be put back. My thought was it seemed to be that the data was being checked. And when the conclusion was that the chart was fine and the machine collected the information correctly, that the data was put back. Now, I haven't talked to anyone about this, but that was my feeling from what I was seeing over and over again. Now, the technological effect occurred on an ongoing basis for weeks leading into months in the latter part of 2020. In fact, the specific dates were September 12th, 2020 to November 25th. Coincidentally, this, I noticed, happened to be for a significant period of time before the presidential election in the United States, and then for about 3 weeks or so after the presidential election in the United States. And so I thought that that was an interesting coincidence. I'm not drawing any conclusions because I really can't draw any. I don't have enough information, but I'm just making an observation. The interesting thing about the current technological effect, and I guess I had been wondering if we'd see it again, but it's interesting because it started at really almost the exact same time that a 12-hour-long series of geomagnetic storms started. Let me show you that here. So the geomagnetic storms went on and on. I'm sorry, not storms, disturbances. It was a KP4 level series of events or event. And so it went from basically 10 p.m. local time on the chart, so 20 hours, to 20 hours the next day. And yesterday, when I talked about it, I made the hypothesis that perhaps if this is a technological effect, that the equipment maybe was being tested during a very long geomagnetic disturbance. And that seemed like a pretty reasonable thought. Except that the geomagnetic disturbances did end, technological effect continued. So maybe there's sort of a test before and after. I don't know. I looked at the image of the effect during the storm here, and then after the storm here. I did not see a difference. There was a little bit of extra, possibly, effect up here, but this looks like it could have been from the natural resonances. It's interesting because the hertz starts here at about 2 hertz. That's where the effect begins, very, very consistently. It might vary just very, very slightly, does it? Or is that an optical illusion of the eye? Let's see here. It might vary just very, very slightly here. Interestingly, there were some key times where it went above, but again, this could have been a natural effect rather than the technological effect, and I'll show you why here. If we go over to here, we see these are good examples here. These are good examples of vertical lines that are, I believe, a natural effect in the chart here and here. So it does frequently happen that there are natural lines of hertz that just come vertically through the chart, meaning that they occur from 0 to 40 hertz all at the same time. And you can see how the technological effect looks quite different than these lines. I often call this the do-do-do-do-do-do line that seems to be almost a download of divine energy, if you will, and often they are purple or light purple, like this is here. One other observation that I would make is that I looked at these lines, lifting my vision a little earlier today. And when I did that, I saw not just vertical lines, but also horizontal lines in spaced periodic patterns as well, so that it was actually a complete grid across the frequency ranges. One of the interesting differences between the current technological effect and the one that ended on November 25th, 2020, is that it seemed to extend a little further into the very low hertz and more dramatically. There's another difference as well with a previous technological effect that I wanted to show you. This is the technological effect that occurred from September 2nd through about September 4th, local time on the charts. You can see here how there's some significant differences in terms of there was patterning involved in this version of the technological effect, starting at about maybe about 7.83 or a little lower than that. It was much more like the current technological effect of just a straight line. This version of the technological effect on April 3rd, 2020 was similar. Let me show you that. It had both a combination of pretty much just straight lines and much darker on the chart than the ones we see today. But it also had the interesting pattern effect. I discussed this particular set of lines. It's in the primer, the 2-hour primer. That's the first video. But what I wanted to say here was what appears to me to be the difference between this more complex, quote-unquote, technological effect and the technological effect that we see today here. All I can say here is my sense of the energy and my observation of its appearance and my knowledge from having done the previous videos, in particular what I discussed in the primer. But what I would say that the key difference might be in this technological effect relative to the ones that caused, very intricate patterns would be that this one and the one that occurred in the fall from September to November might have been more of a monitoring effect, whereas the technological effect, as I've called it, from April may have been more of a changing effect, where frequencies were actually being manipulated rather than observed. If so, then the current technological effect would appear to be another monitoring event.